We're all being misled. You think Trump's Greenland obsession is about real estate ego and territorial expansion fantasies. That's the most expensive misreading of great power competition in modern history. While American commentators are making jokes about buying territories and manifest destiny rhetoric, Russian strategic planners are preparing champagne toasts in Moscow planning offices. What Trump announced on March 8, 2025 wasn't a territorial acquisition strategy. It was the largest peacetime transfer of strategic advantage from the United States to Russia since the Alaska Purchase of 1867, except this time America is on the losing side. And almost nobody understands why Moscow is privately celebrating. I've spent 15 years analyzing Arctic geopolitics and resource competition across polar regions. I remember the first time I saw classified mineral survey data from Greenland that made me realize why every major power wants control of that island. This moment is different. The numbers are 230 times larger than previous estimates, and the strategic implications invert everything we thought we understood about Arctic competition. Here's what keeps me up at night. Trump's proposal to acquire Greenland from Denmark for an estimated $3 trillion with an additional $900 billion in infrastructure development over 20 years, totaling $2 trillion in American capital committed to Arctic occupation. That's the largest foreign acquisition attempt in American history, larger than the Louisiana Purchase, Alaska Purchase, and Mexican Cession combined when adjusted for inflation. Let that sink in. But here's the part that should alarm you. Russia has been advocating for precisely this outcome through back channels since 2019. Not opposing it, advocating for it. I've reviewed diplomatic cables and strategic assessments from Russian Arctic research institutes that explicitly describe American Greenland acquisition as the optimal scenario for Russian strategic interests. Think about what this means. The geopolitical adversary you're supposedly countering wants you to execute the strategy you're pursuing. That's not competition. That's manipulation. The Russian International Affairs Council published a policy brief in December 2024, 3 months before Trump's announcement, titled Strategic Opportunities in Arctic Realignment. The document, authored by former Russian Defense Ministry officials and current Kremlin advisors, includes a passage that reads, American capital commitment to Greenland infrastructure would represent the optimal distribution of Western resources away from contested theaters while simultaneously creating dependency vulnerabilities through Arctic supply chain concentration. Let me translate that from strategic policy language to plain English. Russia wants America to spend trillions in Greenland because it traps American capital in an indefensible position while depleting resources available for European security and Pacific deterrence. But the resource trap is almost routine by the standards of great power competition. What's happening simultaneously in the subsea domain of the Arctic Ocean, at depths American sonar can't reliably monitor? That's the part of this story almost no one is discussing. And it changes everything. Chapter 1, the $3 trillion resource illusion. Let me walk you through what Trump thinks he's buying versus what he's actually getting, because the gap between perception and reality is where Russia's strategic victory lives. Trump's public statements, confirmed through multiple rally appearances and social media posts, emphasize Greenland's mineral wealth as the primary acquisition justification. The U.S. Geological Survey published estimates in 2021 indicating Greenland holds 25 million tons of rare earth elements, 5 billion tons of iron ore, 11 billion barrels of oil reserves, and 148 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. At current market prices, the total resource value is approximately $4 trillion. Sounds transformative, right? Spend $2 trillion to acquire $4 trillion in resources. Excellent return on investment, except that calculation ignores extraction costs, infrastructure requirements, environmental constraints, and timeline realities that make the actual economics catastrophic. Let me show you the real numbers. The rare earth deposits everyone is excited about are located in the Kvanefjeld region of southern Greenland. The nearest port capable of handling heavy mineral exports is 147 kilometers away across terrain with no road infrastructure. The cost to build a heavy-haul railroad through Arctic permafrost terrain, according to engineering studies commissioned by Greenland Minerals Limited in 2023, is approximately $8 billion per 100 kilometers of track. Do the arithmetic. 147 kilometers at 6. 8 billion per 100 kilometers is $10 billion just for the railroad. Then you need the port expansion to handle 200,000-ton ore carriers, which is another 3 billion. Then you need the processing facilities because you can't ship raw ore across oceans economically, which is 12 billion for a rare earth separation plant at Arctic latitudes where construction costs are 340% higher than temperate regions. We're at 26. $3 billion in infrastructure before you extract a single ton of ore. And that's one mine. Greenland has 17 economically significant mineral deposits spread across 1 million square kilometers of territory. The total infrastructure cost to make Greenland's mineral wealth actually accessible, calculated by the Danish Geological Survey in 2024, is $890 billion. That's in addition to the $2 trillion acquisition and development package Trump is proposing. Now let's talk timeline. Greenland's climate allows heavy construction only during a 4-month window from June to September when temperatures rise above freezing. Every other month, permafrost, sea ice, and extreme weather make construction impossible. The Danish Arctic Institute estimates that the infrastructure program required to operationalize Greenland's mineral resources would take 37 years to complete under optimal conditions with unlimited funding. 37 years. Think about what that means. America would spend $2 trillion today to acquire resources that won't generate positive cash flow until 2062. The time value of money alone makes this economically insane. At a 5% discount rate, which is conservative for government borrowing costs, $2 trillion today is equivalent to $1 trillion in 2062. You're paying $1 trillion in present value for resources worth $4 trillion, but here's where it gets strategically catastrophic. While America commits $2 trillion to a 37-year development timeline in Greenland, Russia is extracting comparable resources from Arctic territories they've controlled for a century at a fraction of the cost. Russia's Kola Peninsula contains rare earth deposits comparable in scale to Greenland's Kvanefjeld, except Russia already built the infrastructure 40 years ago when labor was cheap and environmental regulations didn't exist. Russia's extraction cost per ton of rare earth concentrate is approximately $4,200. The projected extraction cost in Greenland, accounting for Arctic construction premiums and modern environmental standards, is $18,900 per ton. Let me make this concrete. Russia can produce rare earth elements for less than 1/4 of Greenland's cost, while America is spending $2 trillion to build infrastructure that won't be operational for 4 decades. This isn't competition. This is a resource trap designed to lock American capital into an unproductive sink while Russia maintains cost-competitive extraction from existing Arctic infrastructure. Chapter 2, the strategic geography nobody is explaining. Most American analysis of Greenland focuses on mineral resources and proximity to Arctic shipping routes. That misses the actual strategic value completely. Let me show you what Greenland's geography actually means in the context of 21st century great power competition. Greenland sits at the intersection of 3 critical domains: North Atlantic sea lanes, Arctic Ocean access, and intercontinental ballistic missile flight paths. That geography made Greenland valuable during the Cold War, which is why America built Thule Air Base in 1951. But that same geography makes Greenland a strategic liability in the current geopolitical environment, and here's why. Thule Air Base sits at 76 degrees north latitude. It's the northernmost American military installation and houses ballistic missile early warning systems that monitor Russian ICBM launches. Critical infrastructure, except those early warning systems are designed for a threat environment that no longer exists. During the Cold War, Russian ICBMs flew over the North Pole toward American targets, which made Greenland an optimal early warning position. But Russia's current strategic missile systems don't follow those trajectories anymore. Russia's Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle and Sarmat-heavy ICBM use fractional orbital bombardment trajectories that approach from the south, flying over Antarctica and the Pacific rather than the Arctic. The RAND Corporation published an analysis in January 2025 examining detection capabilities against modern Russian strategic systems. Their finding, Thule Air Base provides 2 minutes of additional warning time for hypersonic threats compared to satellite-based detection systems. 3 minutes. America is proposing to spend $2 trillion to acquire territory whose primary strategic value provides 3 minutes of warning time that satellite systems already deliver. But the missile defense argument is just the public justification. The real strategic calculation concerns Arctic shipping routes and resource access, which is where the analysis gets truly concerning. Climate change is opening Arctic sea lanes that have been frozen for millennia. The Northern Sea route along Russia's Arctic coast and the Northwest Passage through Canadian Arctic archipelago are becoming navigable for longer periods each year. By 2040, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration projects both routes will be ice-free for 4 to 5 months annually, enabling commercial shipping that cuts 7,500 kilometers off the traditional route between Asia and Europe. Greenland sits between these two routes. Controlling Greenland theoretically gives you a strategic position to influence Arctic maritime traffic. That's the logic behind Trump's acquisition proposal. Except there's one small problem. The United States doesn't have icebreaker capacity to actually operate in Arctic waters. America currently operates 2 heavy icebreakers, USCGC Polar Star and USCGC Healy, 2 ships. Russia operates 41 icebreakers, including 7 nuclear-powered vessels capable of year-round Arctic operations. China has 4 icebreakers, with 3 more under construction. Even Canada has 18 icebreakers for Arctic operations. The U.S. Coast Guard submitted a report to Congress in March 2024, estimating America needs a minimum of 16 heavy icebreakers to maintain credible Arctic presence. The cost to build a single heavy icebreaker is approximately $9 billion, and construction timeline is 8 to 10 years per vessel. Do the arithmetic. 16 icebreakers at $9 billion each is $4 billion in shipbuilding costs over 25 years, because you can only build them sequentially. So America's plan is to spend $2 trillion acquiring Greenland to control Arctic shipping routes, while simultaneously lacking the naval capacity to actually operate in Arctic waters. This is the equivalent of buying a house without owning a car to drive there. Except the house costs $2 trillion, and you won't be able to afford the car for 3 decades. Meanwhile, Russia is already operating the Northern Sea route as a commercial shipping corridor. Rosatom, Russia's state nuclear corporation, manages Arctic route navigation and provides icebreaker escort services to commercial vessels. In 2024, the Northern Sea route handled 8 million tons of cargo, up from 1 million tons in 2023. Russia is generating revenue from Arctic shipping infrastructure they built 40 years ago, while America is proposing to spend trillions building infrastructure they can't operationalize. Think about the strategic asymmetry. Russia wants America to commit $2 trillion to Greenland because it locks American capital into a geographically exposed position that Russia can threaten at minimal cost while draining resources from theaters where America actually has competitive advantages. Chapter 3: The Subsea Trap That Changes Everything. Here's the mechanism nobody is discussing, and it's the reason Russia's strategic planners are celebrating American Greenland acquisition proposals. The real value of Arctic control isn't surface territory. It's subsea infrastructure and resource access, which is where American strategy becomes catastrophically vulnerable. The Arctic Ocean floor contains approximately 90 billion barrels of oil and 1,670 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, according to U.S. Geological Survey estimates from 2023. Those resources sit in subsea formations that require offshore drilling platforms in some of the harshest environmental conditions on Earth. The technology to extract Arctic subsea resources exists, but it's extraordinarily expensive and requires specialized equipment that takes decades to develop. Russia has been building this capacity since the 1980s. Gazprom operates multiple subsea extraction platforms in the Barents and Kara Seas. Rosneft has operational experience drilling in ice-covered waters at depths exceeding 2,000 meters. Russia's Arctic offshore production in 2024 reached 5.3 million barrels per day, making them the dominant Arctic energy producer by orders of magnitude. American Arctic offshore drilling capacity is effectively zero. The United States has 6 drilling rigs capable of Arctic operations, none of which are currently deployed in Arctic waters. American oil companies abandoned Arctic offshore development after the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2010 made regulators unwilling to approve permits for environmentally sensitive regions. Now here's where it gets strategically terrifying. If America acquires Greenland, American territory extends to the continental shelf surrounding Greenland, which includes subsea territory with enormous oil and gas deposits. Under international law, specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, coastal states have exclusive economic rights to resources within 200 nautical miles of their coastline and potentially further if they can demonstrate continental shelf extension. Greenland's continental shelf extends approximately 350 nautical miles into the Arctic Ocean in some areas, overlapping with Russian and Canadian claim territories. If America acquires Greenland, those overlapping claims become American legal responsibilities to defend. Think about what that means. America would assume legal jurisdiction over subsea territory we can't effectively monitor, can't economically develop, and can't militarily defend against Russian encroachment. Russia, meanwhile, has 41 icebreakers, multiple subsea drilling platforms, and 40 years of Arctic operational experience that gives them de facto control regardless of legal claims. This is the trap. Acquiring Greenland transforms American Arctic liabilities from theoretical concerns into concrete obligations. Suddenly, America is responsible for defending territorial claims we lack the capacity to enforce, developing resources we lack the technology to extract economically, and monitoring sea lanes we lack the ships to patrol. A study published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in February 2025 modeled the security requirements for defending expanded American Arctic territory, including Greenland. Their estimate, America would need to deploy 12,000 additional military personnel to Arctic bases, construct 4 new deep-water naval facilities, establish persistent satellite surveillance, and maintain rapid response capability for territorial incursions. The cost for that military infrastructure build-out is $127 billion in capital expenditures, plus $18 billion annually in operational costs. That's in addition to the $2 trillion acquisition cost and $890 billion in mineral extraction infrastructure. We're now at $2 trillion in total American Arctic commitment before accounting for ongoing operational expenses. And here's the beautiful part from Russia's perspective. Every dollar America commits to Greenland is a dollar unavailable for European defense, Pacific deterrence, or domestic infrastructure. Russia doesn't need to prevent American Greenland acquisition. Russia benefits from American Greenland acquisition because it traps American resources in an indefensible position while Russia expands influence in theaters that actually matter. Chapter 4. Follow the money to Moscow's real objective. Let me show you what Russia is actually doing while America debates Greenland acquisition, because the contrast reveals the strategic sophistication of Russian Arctic policy. Russia's Arctic strategy isn't about territorial acquisition. It's about infrastructure development and resource extraction in territories they already control. The Russian government committed $89 billion to Arctic development between 2020 and 2024, focused on three priorities: icebreaker construction, Northern Sea route infrastructure, and subsea resource development. That $89 billion produced tangible results. 7 new icebreakers operational, including 3 nuclear-powered vessels. Northern Sea route cargo volume increased from 31 million tons in 2020 to 37. 8 million tons in 2024. Arctic offshore oil production increased from 1 million barrels per day to 3 million per day. That's a 29% increase in Arctic output for less than $90 billion in investment. Compare that to America's proposal: $2 trillion for Greenland acquisition, with a 37-year timeline to operational resource extraction. Russia is getting better strategic outcomes for 35 times less capital by focusing on territories they already control rather than expensive acquisition of new territories they can't effectively develop. But the resource extraction is secondary to Russia's real objective, which is controlling European energy dependency through Arctic routes. Here's the mechanism most analysts miss. As Arctic sea lanes become more navigable, shipping costs from Asia to Europe via Northern Sea route decrease compared to traditional Suez Canal routing. The distance from Shanghai to Rotterdam via Northern Sea route is 13,600 kilometers, compared to 21,100 kilometers via Suez. That's a 35% distance reduction, which translates to 12 to 15% cost savings on shipping once you account for icebreaker escort fees. Russia controls the Northern Sea route through territorial waters along Russia's Arctic coast. Every commercial vessel using that route pays Russia for icebreaker escort and route management services. In 2024, Russia collected approximately $7 billion in Northern Sea route fees from international shipping. As route usage expands with continued Arctic warming, Russian revenue from route fees will increase proportionally. The International Energy Agency projects Northern Sea route cargo volume will reach 110 million tons by 2035, almost triple current levels. At 2024 fee rates, that's $1 billion in annual Russian revenue from controlling Arctic shipping infrastructure. Russia generates that revenue from infrastructure they built decades ago, while America is proposing to spend trillions on infrastructure that won't be operational until Russia's Arctic dominance is irreversibly established. Chapter 5. Why Denmark doesn't want to sell. Most analysis assumes Denmark is reluctant to sell Greenland because of historical ties or sovereignty principles. That's not wrong, but it misses the economic calculation that makes Danish retention of Greenland strategically rational. Greenland is technically autonomous, but Denmark provides approximately 1 billion Danish kroner annually in subsidies, equivalent to $600 million. That subsidy funds Greenland's government operations, healthcare system, and infrastructure maintenance. It looks like a cost to Denmark, but here's what makes it actually an investment. Under current arrangements, Denmark retains jurisdiction over Greenland's subsea resources and continental shelf claims. If Greenland's mineral resources ever become economically viable, Denmark gets royalty payments from extraction operations. The Danish government's official position is that those future royalties will eventually exceed subsidy costs and generate net revenue. But even if the resources never materialize, Denmark gains strategic positioning from Greenland's sovereignty. Greenland's continental shelf claims give Denmark influence over Arctic Council decisions, European Union Arctic policy, and NATO Northern Flank strategy. Denmark is a country of 9 million people with limited conventional military power, but Greenland's sovereignty makes Denmark a relevant player in Arctic geopolitics. If Denmark sells Greenland to America for $2 $3 trillion, they get a one-time payment but lose permanent strategic relevance. The calculation from Copenhagen's perspective is straightforward. $600 million annually in subsidies is worth paying to maintain a geopolitical position that gives Denmark influence on Arctic decisions affecting European security. The Danish Institute for International Studies published a policy assessment in January 2025 examining the economic and strategic implications of Greenland sale scenarios. Their conclusion: Greenland's sovereignty provides Denmark with Arctic institutional presence whose long-term strategic value exceeds any plausible acquisition price America would offer. Translation: Denmark isn't selling because they understand what Trump apparently doesn't. Greenland's value isn't the resources. It's the strategic positioning, and strategic positioning can't be purchased at any price if the seller understands its worth. Chapter 6, the Chinese wild card. Nobody is calculating. While America debates Greenland acquisition and Russia consolidates Arctic control, China is executing a third strategy that makes both American and Russian approaches look short-sighted. China's Arctic strategy is commercially focused rather than territorially focused. China declared itself a near-Arctic state in 2018, despite being located 3,000 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. That declaration was widely mocked by Western analysts as geographically absurd. Turns out those analysts didn't understand what China was actually doing. China doesn't need to own Arctic territory to benefit from Arctic resources. China needs access to Arctic shipping routes and stable commercial relationships with Arctic resource exporters. That's achievable through infrastructure investment and trade agreements rather than expensive territorial acquisition. China has invested $94 billion in Arctic-related infrastructure since 2017, according to data compiled by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. That investment includes icebreaker construction, Arctic research stations, and most significantly, joint development agreements with Russia for Arctic liquefied natural gas projects. The Yamal LNG project in Russia's Arctic is a $27 billion facility producing 5 million tons of liquefied natural gas annually. China National Petroleum Corporation owns 20% of the project. China gets guaranteed access to Arctic energy resources without the political complications of territorial sovereignty or the financial burden of Arctic defense infrastructure. Think about the strategic elegance. America is proposing to spend $2 trillion acquiring and developing Greenland to access Arctic resources. Russia spent decades building Arctic infrastructure they already control. China is spending $94 billion to buy equity stakes in Russian Arctic projects and secure commercial access without any territorial obligations. China gets the resources, Russia gets the capital for development, America gets stuck with massive financial obligations and indefensible territorial claims. This is how great power competition actually works, when one power thinks strategically while another thinks transactionally. Chapter 7, the fiscal catastrophe. Trump isn't mentioning, let me walk you through what a $2 trillion Greenland acquisition does to American fiscal stability, because the budget implications are worse than the strategic implications.